Campbellls comments, trying to break down some of the barriers. Dave Sanders joins me all the way from New Zealand. Firstly, Dave, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you.
It's a beautiful day. You work for Haras Trotteurs, as I do, but I suppose this interview today is basically to break down some of the barriers and understanding how French racing works. And this comes off the back of Classic Connection coming to stand at Haras Trotteurs this year for the first season, and he's going to be standing for the fee of $5,500, and of that $5,500 there is a $3,000 breeder's bonus, Dave, which is huge. Goes back to the breeder. If they there's actually other terms and conditions, and I encourage everyone to go to the website therefore at Haras Trotteurs, across the bottom there, harastrotteurs.com.au, and look up his service fees. Dave, a horse like this, they don't come to Australia very often. He's the first shuttle stallion to be standing in Australia and New Zealand with chilled semen. It's a huge coup for Australian racing.
Yes, it really is. He's a Group 1 winner in Germany, and he is a multiple Group 2 winner. He actually won 5 group races in all, so a couple of Group 2s and a couple of Group 3s in France. So he's he won a very, very good group race at Vincennes on the Prix d'Amérique day when we were all there as a part of a tour, as you've probably heard about. Pat actually tried to buy him outright, but his owner and breeder, Monsieur Jean-Pierre Dubois, who's probably the greatest breeder of trotters the world's seen, and he didn't want to part with him because he wants to use him because of his bloodlines to go over his European mares, and we'll go through that, what constitutes a European mare later on, I guess. So Pat had to purchase the Southern Hemisphere rights, so Monsieur Dubai will use him over his European mares, and working towards his vision of how to breed the best horse. So, and he's got a fantastic pedigree. It's a pedigree that really brings together the best of both the French and which is his sire side, which is half French, half American anyway, and then his dam side, which is his dam was the top 2-year-old filly in the US that year, and ran as the 3-year-old, ran third in Ampo Oaks, and she was placed 3 times in really, really important 3-year-old races with prize ring. Who's a sister to Brigham Dream, who's a USA Breeders' Crown winner. So plenty of depth there, and she's by Taurus Dream, who carries French blood on the inside on his maternal line, and he was all set to become a really good stallion and died very, very young. And then, of course, you've got all the other lines like End of a Horn. So it's just a wonderful mix, and he's going to make an absolute. He's going to give us the opportunity to be able to double up on a lot of the bloodlines that we have here.
We'll catch up with his pedigree and how that works in a little bit. But the enormity of French racing probably gets lost on a lot of Australians. I think you said there before about people that went on that tour, they were just blown away by it. Firstly, how big is trotting in France, and then how hard is it, I suppose, to make a stallion?
Yeah, well, we were talking about this before. The horse industry in Europe is absolutely massive. I've got some figures in front of me here that it's the annual turnover of the horse industry in Europe is over 100 billion euros a year. It employs about 400,000 people, and it utilises 7 million hectares in Europe on the continent. And there's 20 odd countries that actually have trotting races in Europe. So, and while the majority of those also, of course, are used for recreational. I mean, as you know, the Olympics are on right now, and the equestrian there is a massive industry, as you well know. The show jumping and the dressage and the hunting and the ponies and all the rest of it, it's just massive. But and really no other equine no other country probably recognises the value of the equine industry better than France. They're the biggest breeders of horses in the world, and they're also the most proactive in promoting the industry in every sphere. So, especially their gift to the world, the Trotteurs Français, which is, their pride and joy. International Trotteurs Français racing. They promote the racing in other countries. They've got it now in 30 countries, and I think Australia is now is also a member of that group.
Is that designed to make the trotter, I suppose, more powerful worldwide? Is that one of the plans with that? How do we describe it? If you just bear with me for a second, because it takes to understand how it works. The whole industry is run under a group called the Société d'Encouragement de l'Élevage de Cheval Français, which is the SECF. They run it's a society. It's a non-profit, or it's there to create the funds to promote the industry, and then under that there's a stud book which runs the Trotteurs Français, and that's the Institut Français de Cheval de l'Equitation, which is the IFCE, and they set out the rules for the French trotting stud book. And they have a committee that governs everything from the pedigree registration, the artificial insemination rules, stallion selection, covering and selection of the brood mares, suspension of brood mares, because it is so regulated that they only have a certain number of stallions every year and a certain number of French brood mares. So it's a massive industry, and they also run the races under that, and they have international races that they actually pay for. So there are 1,140 races subsidised by Le Trot to the tune of 3.7 million. That's outside. That's in international trotting. That's not in French trotting. It's outside. Wow.
So they subsidise racing to that degree, and they have 5 group races that are run in Europe. It's called the Tour European Trotteurs Français. So this showcases French trotting. It began in 2007 with 3 international events at Belgium, Spain, and Switzerland, and it's now been extended to Austria and Germany, I think, for the other 2. And you'll see in those races, like Billy de Montfort, who you've seen race in the Prix d'Amérique, and Olga de Buwitz, who won the Prix de Cornulia, which is their huge €700,000, their big Group 1 Monty race that they've got. They race on those circuits. Bird Parker, I think, raced on it as well recently. So they're not muppet horses that go there. They're the cream, and they go to Belgium and Switzerland.
So Dave, with the French trotter, and you get a good horse, they just stand him at stud. It's just very easy for a horse just to go through his classes, win a few races, and then be able to stand at stud. It's not quite that simple. It's not quite that simple, is it?
I can. Right. How do we go to that? Stallion selection. So before being allowed to service any mares, Trotteurs Français stallions must be approved by the SECF, which is, as we said, and are categorised according to the number of mares they're allowed to cover. So these categories are allocated by a set of race-based conditions and times, or by, they just introduced over the last 4 or 5 years a point-based system for. So their top category is Category 1, and these are the top stallions. They can serve up to 100 mares, and it's entirely performance-based. And then Category 2 is restricted to stallions who can cover 60 mares, and that's based on performance or a combination of performance earnings and associated group winning dams or siblings. So if they've got a pedigree, if their brother was a great horse or their dam produced 2 or 3 group winners, they can go to Category 2 if they don't fulfill those race-based conditions. And then Category 3 is for a special case stallions who are allowed up to 20 coverings annually, and therefore horses that didn't make the track. But they are so few. There are very, very few horses that stand at Category 3.
Just before you get off the Category 3 very quickly there, Dave, On Solitaire, another horse that stands under the Haras Trotteurs banner, he is almost in that category, isn't he? Exceptionally well-bred horse, but didn't hit the track, and because he didn't hit the track, then he can't stand in France. So he comes to Australia and New Zealand with.
Yes, but if he breeds, this is the thing. If he breeds a Group winner, like if one of his sons go out and win a Group 1 here, he can then go back and
wow.
I'm sure that's the case, that he can go back and stand in France. I'm pretty sure if my reading of the regulations is right, and I'm pretty sure he will be eligible because he's produced a Group 1. So that, because they have a whole bunch of races, and Australia is actually there's a whole bunch of regulations on those races, and I'm pretty sure that if it's the right race, he will be allowed. And it may not be, he may not be able to cover the full. There may not be a Category 1, but he can certainly do Category 3 or 2 at that level. He probably can do Category 3 right now if they wanted, but so it's up to, they can go from, as I said, you can go from 2 to 1, and you can also drop down if you don't produce the requisite number of qualifiers. Once you get a group, once you breed a Group winner, you're fine.
Yep.
Right, and that's why group racing is so important.
Yep.
Okay, because all the breeding is based on their group earnings, and sorry, their group status. So if you win a Group 3, you get a certain number of points to get it, and also of course you get money. Very good money. So does the breeder. It's something else.
So a horse like Classic Connection, he's by a French stallion, by Love You, champion sire, but being out of a Canadian bred mare.
He's not a Trotter Français.
Yeah, and that's where he
cannot stand in France.
And yet, Mr. Duar, who
they can serve in France, they can, but they cannot be registered in France as a Trotter Français. So those horses are then. Those horses are then registered in Belgium or Italy or not so much. Germany, and they all have their industry, so that there's races for them, and they can win. They've got their own group races and such, which have a certain status, and that's all in these regulations. Of 17 articles of them that stretch all this information is there.
Yep.
You can download it, and all those races are categorized, and they're all given points, and the times they're doing that. If they run it, so if they run the first 7 and they get the right time, they get a point for 2 for that.
Yep.
So they've got to have done. It's all, as I said, France is highly regulated. Everything is, it's just.
And being a stallion and being a horse like Classic Connection, the key would have been Connections. Mr. Duar would have been trying to get him to France to make him get to be able to win those races, because again, it's not just a walk-up start that he can compete in France in some of the group races that you need in your, I suppose, arsenal and the likes.
Well, those group races, again, a part of that whole thing is that in France also, France also has races in France as being part of the European Union. It has a certain percentage of its races open to European horses. So, yeah, you've got the criterium, the Trotteurs and the criterium de Patence, they're 3 and 4 year old, equivalent to our derbies. They're restricted for the French Trot Francais horses. But the Criterium Continental, which is another Group 1 race, not only is open to it's a 4-year-old Group 1 criterium, it's not only open to all the European horses, it also has a ticket to the Prix de Mérite. So, and Mr. Dubois, of course, would have been looking with Classic Connection and to get him into the Prix de Mérite. He was, there's been a lot of horses, that have won the Prix de Mérite and not Trotter Francais. Maharaja, the leading stallion in Sweden, is Swedish bred with French bloodlines on his dam side, who was, he won the Prix de Mérite and is, as I said, the top stallion in Sweden at the moment, and has been for the last couple of 3 seasons.
One of our other, I suppose, conversations we had off air, and we've had quite a few, and trying to get so people can actually, I suppose, understand how it works. To make the big races, it is a long process for a horse. A little bit like this, it's not necessarily purely French bred. So for him to be able to get to those elite races and win a couple of Group 2s in France, it's no small feat at all, is it?
No small feat at all. Everything in France is done by euros earned, right? Yep. And so I'm going off the top of my head here. I think there are 7 provinces in France, or 7, 6 or 7 different authorities, provincial authorities, and so there are tracks in those areas. So they'll qualify, they'll get their ticket, they'll then enter 2, 3 or 4 year old races, depending on what years they will then earn money from that, and then they will advance through the grades. The better ones will then go to towards everything. Everything, as I said, is centralised in France, and all the best races, or 95% of the best races, are at Vincennes or only in Paris. So, and you get there by winning the money to go up to the next level, and so you win your first couple of, or get placed, and you'll earn good money. You get places down to 7th.
Yep. And
they're not like New Zealand and Australia, where all the majority of the money goes to the, we have something like more than 60-70% of the money goes to the winner here. Whereas in France, it's very much smaller than that. It's like 40, 20, 10, 5, 3, 2, 1, or whatever it is. But so you can actually earn good money running 2nd and 3rd and advance up through and there are a lot of good horses that will earn good money by placing in those group races, and they're given that status, as I said. If you run 2nd or 3rd in a group race, that's seen as far better than winning 17 races down, for 2,000-3,000 euros at some provincial town in Bordeaux or someplace. So all the good races are there, and all the top races, the top horses are there. So there are horses that are, if you see a horse that's won 2nd or 3rd or 4th in a Group 1, that's given huge status over there, because they know you've had to be very good to get there in the first place, and they reward them for that, and the breeders know that too. The breeders will know that horses that are got group. If you look through a French, when you go to the sales, you'll see all those races, 2nd or 3rd or 4th, in the big Group 1s, all the big Group 2s.
Yep.
And they're they are worth something. They are genuine black tie. They're not, they're not time. And you never see times like they laugh at you because times don't mean anything. It doesn't know. Time doesn't differentiate how fast a race was run, what position the horse was in that race, whether he had an easy run, whether the track was fast that day, or whatever. Times mean absolutely nothing. It's all about who you beat, who you raced against, at what level, and So if you're racing at Vincennes, you're a damn good horse. Because you're racing a group race in Vincennes, you're an extremely good horse. And if you're racing the Group 1, you're damn near a champion. You're the best out of 17,000 horses that were bred that year. That's only in France, and then there's the other probably 17,000 bred all around Europe who have a chance to get in there by that process. So when you get your great group races in Europe, you've got the cream of the cream.
Yeah,
It's none of this. Rocking up with your check and saying I'm getting in that because I've got the money to stake up. None of that there. No, you've got to prove you're good enough to get there.
And one of the other things you said to me the other day, Dave, just while we're on proving to get there, racing aged races until they're 6.
Absolutely.
So if you've got a champion in that grade, you're chasing that horse for another 4 or 5 years.
This is what's happening over there at the moment with FaceTime Burton. It happened with Bold Eagle.
Yep.
It happened with Ready Cash. And poor old Tomoko came up against all 3 of them, I think. He still won 2 elite lops, and we got Tomoko on the thing, but he was a super horse too. Same, you get these freaks who come out there who dominate everything, and so you're running around, but you're still earning good money. I mean, as I said, they reward them well for the big races. But
that component of it would make these Group 2s, or even as you just said, then placing in these Group 1s behind Bold Eagles, Ready Cash, stacks their form up. It's a different way of looking at the form. It's like what you said. It's so different to how we look at American and Australian racing. You've got to look at it differently.
You really get a real feel for just how good a horse is. And the other brilliant thing about France is Vincennes itself. Now, Vincennes is the most unique course I've ever seen because it's not a 1,000-meter circle like all the races, not 1,000-meter. Like all the races are in Sweden. They're banked 1,000, and it's great racing and the rest of it. But there's an element of luck to it.
Yep.
There's an element of luck to the draw if you do. And then like at the elite lot, everything's in the draw. If you're not drawn in the first 4, it's pretty damn hard.
Yep.
And that's why they race, and that's why they try to get that winner second, and so they get to pick in the final. That's all part of it. But over there, Vincennes, it's 1,900 meters. It's basically three straights. They have a starting chute also, which goes 800 meters that way. So they start uphill. They have a starting pad, so they circle. They come out. And they come down the straight. And then they go downhill on the past the and it's a gradual downhill past the stands, and then they turn what they call the Jeanville Plain, which is a short straight at the bottom, and then they go uphill. Then they go up this, and you stand at the bottom and you can see it's a climb. And that's when the races start, and that's where they go in these what they call troikers, which is 3 wide. They go up this hill, and that's when you see them making their move. Right? And then they go up, and then they get to the top of the hill, and then they got this big sweeping turn, and that's when the pace comes on. So then they go up, they've gone right up this hill, trying to get themselves into position to then go downhill around this big turn, and then come around, and then you're on you're trying to battle your way to the winning post. It's a massive test, hugely fun to watch, and it really does sort out the men from the boys or the girls from the women or whichever way. It's a fantastic, and they've got this wonderful system by which they race them from the ages of 2. They race against their own age group from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, all in their own age group, and then by 6 you're strong enough to be able to tackle the big guns. Be good enough.
I love passion, David, and the passion you were just showing just then. Hopefully everyone that watched it. No, it's what I think what drives our sport, and obviously the French are very passionate about it. And that's the idea of this, is to try and promote classic connection and everything that Pat Driscoll is doing with Haras to Trotter, and that's what I'm asked to do, and that's definitely what I'm doing. But to show passion like that, I really like. You've made me want to go to Vincennes.
This passion is a quarter of what Pat's got.
Yes, I know that.
And it was Vincennes which really captivated him. He'd never seen a trotting race when he'd been to Vincennes. He says, how good's this? If you've been there and you've seen it, and it's a fantastic day's racing, and you get to see the best in the world, and it is the best in the world. And
the way they work their stallions over there, like we look at a horse, and Classic Connection is not an old horse, but we look at a horse like Tomoko and those, and they raced up until they're 9 and 10 years of age. But that's actually what the French are trying to do as well, isn't it? They actually encourage these horses to stand at stud and continue racing. Yeah,
they keep racing. It's amazing how they do it. Well, it's not amazing. It's just, as I said, they're so well organised, they're so well regulated. You can use artificial insemination, but only in the stud that you're at. So you can't transport the semen anywhere in France.
Right.
It's got to be. So what happens is they will train them in the morning, and then they'll have a designated time at the stud, and the mare owners rock up at that time. They're not there at that time, they don't get served, and there'll be half a dozen mares or whatever it is, and they'll collect the semen, they'll sort it out, and then they'll inseminate the mares artificially. But it's a fascinating, and there've been occasions where horses have served the mare in the morning and gone on and win a group race in the afternoon. So how good a day is that for the stallion?
and for connections, because they don't race for peanuts, so he's been paid in the morning and then he's won good money as well. So it's a win-win for everyone. But I think that is one of the key components that when you're assessing a French stallion and you're looking at French stallions stacking up against American horses, especially. Back in the day, they don't do it as much now, but when they were bringing out a lot of these stallions, they might have been an 8, 9, 10-year-old stallion from America that they predominantly bought out of claiming races. But when you see a French stallion coming out and race through till 10 years of age, it's totally different. They're still rating it the elite. From what you're saying, and you might not be able to answer this, if say a horse like Bold Eagle or Tomoko or one of those become uncompetitive, it sounds to me that they'd nearly have to retire them to look after the French product. Would that be fair? There's many reasons why they it's tough at that top level. You can't keep going, but they do realise that if a horse has been good at 2, 3, and 4, there's many reasons why it may not be able to compete at that. Maybe they were pushed too hard. But horses only got so many good performances. Yep.
In it. So if you push them too hard at 2, they're never going to go on at 3. And this is possibly one of the reasons why the American horses don't do so well. It's not because they're not good. It's because they're just cooked at 2 and 3 to get those early races out of them. They don't race anymore after that. So and there are horses in France that are more precocious, so they will be pushed at 2 and 3 to get those races out of them, and they will breed on. There's no two ways that they don't. but so yeah, when a horse is retired, there'll be many reasons why. Whether it was he got injured, or maybe they just got sick of it.
With Classic Connection and his pedigree, he's by Love You, and he's out of a Canadian bred mare. You just have to type it into your YouTube search engine, basically Classic Connection, and it'll come up an interview with Mr. Dubois about why he did this. And basically he said in it that the French horses are big and strong, and that gets back, I think, to what you're saying there, that they run on this 1900 metre hill track, downhill, not structured around times, so the stronger and I suppose the bigger you are, the better you are. And then went to this Canadian mare because they're born to race and a lot of higher speed, and it's a cross that really intrigued him, and he went into great in-depth about that. As a breeding person and an expert, like with the French especially, how does this pedigree for you, like the intrigue in it?
I think Mr. Dubois has probably got a million times more experience with the crossbreeding of the two than I ever had. So I'm not sure that I can really answer that to the depths that he would, and following in his footsteps. I wouldn't really want to try. I do know from having looked at the pedigree that it's got everything that I would be looking for as a broodmare, in terms of he's got the right dam
maternal line.
Yeah, he's got speedy crown, he's got balanced image in it, and he's got all the right the right lines to give you the duplications that you'd be looking for, to bring in, and you don't want to duplicate anything. You want to duplicate exceptional genetics. That's what breeding's all about. And when I look at a pedigree, and I think that I always try to find exceptional horses in that pedigree, and those are the lines that you want to try and get duplications of.
So a horse like Love You, he's got this year so far. He's got 2 sons in the top 5. I saw photos with that trip that you guys made recently to France, and I think it was Tim Butt or Chris Finozio. They took a picture of him in the yard, and I just looked at him. I was like, what a brute! Like he is this French horse, this big, strong horse. But the mark he's leaving in the stallion ranks is exceptional as well, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. No, he's been sensational. And going back to what again, why Mr. Dubois was he and there were a group of them. They in the 80s. 70s actually, the Mr. Levesque who had Rockupine. He was the one that really set it up, because he wanted to breed a really nice horse out of this champion mare, this Rockupine, by Star's Pride, who was the great sire of the time. And even though he wasn't able to race the progeny in France, he then raced them in Germany, and the French authorities agreed to allow them to stand in France, provided they sell them to him. So both those granite, which the product was granite and Floristan, and both of them were bought by the French and were then allowed to go over the French mares.
Is that because of their dominance? Is it?
No, he wanted, Mr. Levesque wanted to then breed, and the French looked at them. Well, they raced really well in Germany. They raced really well in Europe. Both of them. Granite was actually the better racehorse, but Floristan, what a terrific stallion he turned out to be.
Yep.
And then and from there in the 80s, they opened the book a little bit. They allowed 10 mares and 10 stallions to be mated from each side, and the rest of it. And then you started getting your cocktail jets and your deputy Danus, and then the first year they hit the track, I think they won everything, and the second year they closed the book. So I'm not sure if that's exactly why they did it, but the coincidence is there. So, but if you remember, back in the day, just after the World War II, Yonkers, well, no, it wasn't Yonkers, it was Roosevelt, which is another track in New York, had this idea to bring the best of the world trotters together, and they had this race, the Roosevelt International, which went for many years. The first horse that won that was the French horse. Now, the interesting thing about him, his name was Jamin, and his dam was half thoroughbred, and that was done after the war when everything was in disarray. So one breeder bred a couple of mares to these they were actually steeplechase mares, but they, and from those mares, one of the mares produced a mare called Gladys, and Gladys produced Jamin. Now, Jamin won the first ever Roosevelt International. He was a champion in France. He won, I think he won the Prix d'Amérique and a lot of the big races over there. And he won the first of that. And then French horses dominated that race. We'll come back to Jamin in a minute, but they dominated that race. And he had Undamai and Rockapan and Ideal de Guzot and Lieutenant Sania and all those really, really good horses that dominated. But if you go back and look at those races and watch the gates on particularly Ideal de Guzot, if you look at him, you think, how the heck did he get around the track? The gate was really, really something to behold, and not in a good way. But the American horses have always had this beautiful gait, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the major reasons that they wanted to straighten out the gait, obviously, because the French horses could go.
Yep.
They could go, and they could go really, really quick. It's just that their actions weren't that great. So that, I think, was part of why these horses were bred, and it worked so well. You go watch Cocktail Jets win in the Cocktails won the Prix d'Amérique and the Elite Lot, which is, there's not many horses have done that. Varennes and Varennes is another one, Mr. Dubois bred.
Yep.
Amazing breed. Right, so they won both those races, and they both have mixed blood, and the genius that Mr. Dubois is, and he's a horseman first and a breeder not far behind in second, and he can see in a horse obviously what particular horse would need to get the action or the head, because as we know, it's not just the conformation, it's also his temperament, whether he wants to win, whether he wants to please.
Yep.
So there's so many things that go into it, and he obviously is able to pick out those traits and bring them all together to produce these fantastic horses. Now, going back to Jamin was out of, as I said, a thoroughbred. Now, there's a reason why the thoroughbreds are the greatest racehorses in the world, and they call it the X factor, don't they? It's the big heart gene, they call it, whether it's actual big heart, and there's some evidence to say that it is, but it's actually a heart that it's the reason why you've got thoroughbred horses, and you've got jumping horses, and you've got Arabian horses, and the thoroughbred will beat them every day of the week over 5 or 6 furlongs to whatever distance you want to race them over, because of this heart. And this, as I said, this mare Gladys, Jamin wasn't a great a great sire, but a great broodmare sire. Funny enough. And he also had a brother who was a great broodmare sire, and Gladys also produced a daughter, which became the dam of Caprior, who wasn't a great sire, but when mixed with Speedy Simone, produced 3 or 4 of the greatest broodmares we've seen. And one of them is Nesmil, who is the great-granddam, I think, of Love You, and so many of the really, really good stallions. And also he's duplicated on the bottom line, and Caprior and Germain are duplicated on the bottom. If you look at the really, really great French horses that are running around at the moment, you will see on their bottom line Gladys somewhere.
Yep.
Pretty prominent. Like Ready Cash has in triplicate on his dam size line. Triplicate, three of them. And so you take Ready Cash and you put it over Love You, who's got it on his bottom line. And coincidence perhaps, but I'm picking them up. And these horses are bringing that all in. These same genetics were there if you go through the breeding of the American trotter. I mean, those same broodmare, those same lines, they all think comes from a stallion called Glencoe, and Glencoe was imported at an older age into the US, and coincidence or not, he's on the bottom line of a lot of those really, really good trotters.
So
in the early days.
We started off about how structured the French racing is and all the rest, but a horse like Love You's actually came out of passion, I suppose, of a group of gentlemen trying to improve the industry and trying to change the industry up. So not only is he a horse that is got a great pedigree, but he's a horse that's got a great passion beneath him as well that probably shines through, and that's probably why.
That's actually a very, very good point. Absolutely, but it's not shared by everybody, and there is this there's parochiality and parochialism in both the French and the US breeding. The US, they totally won't breed to French horses, and there is a section of the French breeding who want to maintain the purity of the Trotter Français, which is nonsense really when you think about it. If you actually go through all the elements that went into it in the early days, which was basically Norfolk Trotters and thoroughbreds, and in the 30s 2 or 3 very well-bred American horses, but so. And they've even now made in the last 2 or 3 years to be registered in the France TF. You can't have more than 50% American bloodlines and 50% French bloodlines. That's a new thing that's coming. So a lot of these at the moment they're sort of like 47, 53 sort of stuff, but it's got too much and they clamped down on it. So they change it every year. Every year they'll change something just to make it not easy to keep up with.
Dave, I've enjoyed this, and I wasn't sure where it would go. I suppose this whole conversation, it's one of those ones that trying to break down barriers, it can be a tricky thing. So I actually appreciate you giving up your Sunday morning. It's gone past your lunchtime too. You said about your tummy rumbling there before. But just to try and break these barriers down, but you've given great insight, I think, for a lot of people to understand how the French horses work and how different it is to Australian racing, how different it is to American racing, but on a global scale as well. At the end of the day, it is the trotter, and it is improving the product worldwide. And that's something that the Classic Connection, and being coming over here as chilled seaman, one of the first to do this in Australia and New Zealand. He is the first to do it in Australia and New Zealand this year, and he's shuttling. He's going back. He will come back the year after. Pat's bought his Southern Rights thing. This horse is the chance of being a real groundbreaker, because being chilled allows a lot of access to a lot more participants and people to be able to access these bloodlines that you and I have just been chatting about.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a cheap exercise either, if you can imagine. So it allows, and everyone knows that not all there's a huge expense in frozen. Not to say that it's not worth the expense, but not every mare can get in foal frozen.
No.
And chilled allows the more tricky mares to get in foal with an exceptionally good chance of potential size down from the greatest breeder in the world, and I'm not just being biased saying that, but I can't think of anybody who's we're talking about Love You being we didn't get that, but Love You's become a real sight of size. In France at the moment, he's got Royal Dream and Village Mystic in the top 10 alongside him, and there are other ones below him, and I think there's 7 or 8 sons whose products have won over €1 million in France over the last one.
I can't actually correct you on too many things, Dave, but those 2, Royal Mystique and the other horse, are in the top 5.
Royal Dream and Village Mystic.
Yep,
Yes.
And they're in the top 5 stallions in France at the minute, which is sensational. Dave, I am going to let you go because your phone's ringing. Classic Connection. He has arrived. He has arrived in Australia, and as I said, he's going to be released from quarantine, all going well, because I think quarantine, you've got to be careful, August the 3rd, so make sure after that date, hopefully with a little bit of COVID restrictions, people are going to be able to get down and see him. But don't forget to go to the website. But he's standing for the fee of $5,500, including GST here in Australia, and $5,000 in New Zealand. But basically the breeders' bonuses, there's so many incentives. I encourage everyone to go to the websites. I've actually been putting the Haras to Trotteurs website across the bottom. It's up there right now. It's basically harastotrotters.com.au. Visit the website. There's going to be more announcements coming in the new next, I suppose, couple of weeks of some more stallions and some more that Pat's got going on. So it's actually key to go there. But if anyone wants to get in touch with Dave, I've got Dave's email address here, which is simply dave@harastotrotters.com.au. If you've got any queries now, Dave, you're happy to answer people's queries via emails and get back to them to help people pedigree match with the Australian bloodlines?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'll even if someone give me a call, I'll talk them through it. One of the things that I think people don't realise also with these French horses is you are, well, one of the major bonuses is that you are improving your breed all the time. You've got to, like everybody breeds for a colt, but the beauty with these horses is that if you get a filly, you've got something that because they've been bred so well, you've got your building blocks there to be able to improve your breed. You know that we're talking about superior genetics. All those horses that are in those, there's no claimers in those pedigrees. There's, every one of those comes through that very strict, very system whereby the cream really does rise to the top, and these horses have just fantastic pedigrees, and it gives you a fantastic chance to improve on your breed when you're breeding. And so the fillies are worth as much, if not more, than the colts in my eyes.
Well, and especially if you're targeting around improving your product, if you're a small time breeder and you want to build up a band, that can rival Pat Driscoll. Like to be able to take Pat Driscoll on in 10 or 15 years, like it's one of the stepping stones, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, people don't realise how good use to me is. He's Cocktail Jet as his dam sire, and from one of the great French families, and he was a group winner himself.
Yep.
And if it wasn't for injury, he would have been a real good horse.
Yep.
Well, if he wasn't, that's probably not the right way to say it. He would have shown how good a horse he really was, you know, and he was. He won some good, he gained some really good company.
Dave, I'm going to say thank you. As I said, make sure you go to harasdetrotteurs.com.au or dave@harasdetrotteurs.com on his email address. Dave, I appreciate your Sunday, you giving up your Sunday morning to have a chat, break down some of these barriers, which is what I'm going to try and do for these French stallions so people can get their head around them. I appreciate your time. It won't be the last time you and I chat, and I encourage anyone that wants to breed, make sure they get in touch with Dave and check your pedigrees out. Make sure you do it properly, and you know, you could really increase your bloodline. So thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks very much, Paul, and you know, and thank you to the audience for coming on. Thanks.